Good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing? Super great. Awesome. I'm going to try to preach from an iPad, which is not me trying to be a hip millennial. It's just instead, I couldn't get my printer to work this morning. So we'll see how many times the screen turns off. It's going to be great. But kudos to you for getting up so early. So Andy said to me, I've known Andy Hermanson a long time, and he said, Chris, will you preach at men's ministry? And I said, well, of course. And he says, he's like, great. So if you just want to show up like 6:15, whatever. I said, I thought it was in the morning. And he said, 6:15 in the morning. I was like, oh, people are like here. And so last night I had set an alarm to wake up because I was like, as you can tell, like these are the first words I've spoken this morning. And I didn't do my vocal warm-ups in the car or whatever. And I woke up and I had this dream that I had slept through men's ministry and that Andy was going to be sad and I was going to let everybody down. And so I looked at the clock when I woke up in the panic, and it was like 3:30. And I said to myself, you know what? The first guys are probably just getting there now. So kudos to all of you morning people. I appreciate you all. We are, as was said before, my name is Chris Kimpston. I am the adult discipleship minister. I used to be the young adult missions minister, so young adults is in college age, 20s and 30s, and then doing our missions and outreach over there at the Des Moines campus, now known as Hope Elam, and just recently transitioned over to Hope Waukee, where I'm the adult discipleship minister, where I handle classes and all of those things out there. And so it's an honor to be with you all. We're going to talk this morning about something that we at the church don't always do a great job talking about. And when they said secret thought life, I just need everybody to just like take a deep breath corporately, because I'm not going to shame anybody. It's not going to get super weird. So something we don't do a great job talking about the church, and even more important, it's something that if we are not given the proper perspective, what we say from the front of a church can do even more damage than it can good if we're talking about people's thought lives. But first, I'd actually like to start with a story. So I graduated from Valley High School, and my main niche in high school was the music department. It's what I was good at. It's how I was going to pay to go to college. And I'm not saying any of that as a flex. I only say that to let you know how important these concerts and these events were to my life. This was like what I was going to do. This is so every opportunity that we had was going to really lean into the future that I hoped I was going to make for myself. And as many of you might know or have experienced in your own life, those early passions and activities and groups early in life help to make up our identities and how we see ourselves. And so I say all that to set up this story. Spring concert of my junior year. The spring concert's a big deal because all the seniors get recognized. It's their parents have walked up on stage with them. You've been working since the holidays towards this big event. And we had been preparing for this thing, and we're up there, and I'm up there with, I was the lowly junior that got to be in the senior choir. I'm standing there in the middle, like, just picture me, same height, but like 50 pounds less. And I was sitting there looking out, and my director looks at me between one of the songs, and she goes, okay, are you okay? Here's the thing, I thought I was okay. I thought I was fine, right? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, of course I am. I'm like, yeah, why are you singling me out? Do I not look okay? So over the course of the next song, I go down the deepest thought and fastest thought spiral I have ever gone in my life. I went from, oh yeah, I'm okay, to, am I okay? What happens if I'm not okay? What does someone who's not okay do in this scenario? What happens to someone who's not okay if they're not okay up here? Also, everyone's looking at me. I'm feeling kind of weird. I woke up a few moments later, laying on stage. I had passed out in our senior concert in front of all of my peers. Everyone had seen me pass out. Everyone's families had seen me pass out. I had fallen on one of my friends, my friend Adam, who is about like 4'10". I fell onto Adam, And then the insult to injury of it all, my mom had run and just jumped on stage and was like standing over me. So I literally come to, after having embarrassed myself in front of everyone, with my mom just right here. Is the true nightmare of every high school kid. And I bring this story up because something as simple as an innocent question, are you okay? She didn't mean anything malicious by it. But it's just the power of our thoughts have the ability to take you from one place to a completely different place and can manifest into our lives where our actions happen because of what happens in our head. The chapter we're talking about now from this book, Man in the Mirror, is called Leading a Secret Thought Life. And I was given a clicker, so I will use the clicker. At first, Cole, I thought this said clue, and I thought we just like randomly had game pieces. This is great. Leading a Secret Thought Life. And what Patrick Morley, let me start here. What Patrick Morley gets right, and what I'm really grateful for him for saying, if you are on like Team Patrick Morley, I recognize other Hope pastors have come up and maybe taken some issues with Patrick Morley, and I will join that team in just a second. But if you are Team Morley as opposed to Team Ben or whatever, whoever else has been up here talking, one thing I really do appreciate that Patrick Morley gets right is he acknowledges that it is not if you struggle with negative or unwanted thoughts. All right? If you're nobody at your discussion table, I'll give you a phrase, cool story, bro, is something you can say to whoever at your table is like, yeah, this doesn't really affect me. My thought life's perfect. I think everything that I want, and I'm able to block out every other thought. It is not if, but when we deal with unwanted thoughts. And that can look a lot of different ways for many of us, but I appreciate that Patrick Morley talks about that. The author acknowledges we all live with thoughts we would rather not have. And they all run contrary to the ways that we present ourselves to the world around us. Side note, oftentimes in men's ministry, at least in my experience, it's pretty one-sided regarding the type of thoughts that men's ministry gets concerned about, all right? Lust is an important thing for us to consider. Of course, it's the first thing that Patrick Morley jumps into in this story. And it's an important thing to consider, but we're talking about all of the different facets of the ways in which our destructive thoughts are manifesting in our lives. Lust, yes, but also violent ideation, depressive self-hatred, anxious doomsday scenarios, are also included in what we're talking about in regards to having a thought life that causes us problems. I'm talking about anything that reduces you from the man that God made you to be to a lesser version of yourself. So that can look a lot of different ways for us. And how we contend with any of those thoughts have massive impact on every area of our lives. Not just because we like or dislike the things that pop into our head, not just because it's pleasant or unpleasant, but instead, we react to the thoughts that we have, if we react to the thoughts we have, by suppressing them and pretending that we don't have them. That sets us up for failure because we aren't acknowledging the things we're actually struggling with. If you're like, nope, don't handle that. Nope, doesn't exist. Nope, it's not real. I didn't look that direction when I shouldn't have looked that direction at so-and-so. No, I didn't. Oh, man, that guy really made me mad, but I didn't think about punching him in the face. Like, there are all of these scenarios in which we can deny that those exist, but then it also denies that we struggle with those problems. If we obsess over them and we try to subvert them at all times, think of like Dikembe Mutombo. No, not in my house. If we think of ourselves as Dikembe Mutombo, trying to swat away every shot, it would be most like every team in the NBA shooting simultaneously, and Mutombo trying to knock every single shot out of the air. If we do that, it can take us deeper into our heads, because you're constantly trying to police what is going through the screen in your head. And it can take us out of the actual moments of what's actually happening around us. And we can start to punish ourselves for what is happening. We can punish ourselves for what we actually feel like we should be able to control, even though we never had a shot. And that's sometimes what happens here at church. Hopefully not at Hope, but in churches all around America, we make men feel like, hey, if you don't have a handle on this, get it together, guys. If your thought life isn't perfect, and we're not actually going to talk about how it's not perfect for anybody, then you have failed and you just need to show up to more stuff. Maybe even the most important to this conversation is the reason why we're trying to control our thought lives. The reason is not, and hear me when I say this, if you hear anything that I'm saying this morning, if you're a tweeter, tweet this. If you're a note taker, note take this. The reason is not because God is keeping score. I am not telling you to maintain your thought life because God is sitting there with his legal pad marking down every time you mess it up. I've used some sports analogies, and it's important that we both know this in our head and also feel this in our heart. God is not mad at you. I would Goodwill Hunting you if I had enough time this morning. I would just say it over and over again. God is not angry with you. God is not keeping score. God is not saying, man, I really hope that I have to punish Kyle this morning. Man, I really hope Chris doesn't mess this up so that I can make these things in his life go the way he doesn't want them to go. God cares about our thoughts because our mindset is the lens through which we see and act in the world. Oh, there we go. I had more slides than I thought. There we go. God cares about our thoughts because our mindset is the lens through which we see and act in the world. Meaning that our thoughts are vitally important to how we end up living out the lives that we've been given. You ever tried to do work, and you don't have to be an IT person. I've already demonstrated that is clearly not me. But if you have ever tried to work with a computer system that has a fundamental flaw in its code, you ever have a computer that just confounds IT, there is no hope, right? There's even the simplest tasks go wrong. I had to get a new computer recently because there was something in the code somewhere in the updates that every once in a while my computer would just turn off. Doesn't matter what would happen, doesn't matter what I would be in the middle of. If there's something wrong in the operating system because there's a glitch somewhere, it's destined to fail when it tries to function properly. Our heads are like that. We are destined to fail. And I'm not trying to be bleak here. I'm just saying that if perfection is what you're putting up as the goal, or as the expectation rather for yourself, then we need to be able to reframe this to know exactly how we're going to set ourselves up for success and not just complete and outright abject failure. That's how we are. Because we've been handed both blessings and burdens from our family, our parents, our friends, our coaches, our significant others. There's a lot of experiences that maybe have not always set us up for success when it comes to having healthy thoughts. Those glitch in the systems is something that your dad said to you 40 years ago that still has an impact on how you see yourself today. It's that coach that maybe shouldn't have been working with like middle school boys, right? We're put in a scenario in which they actually said something that was really, really detrimental. Maybe your baggage from an ex has led you to have some insecurities or doubts in yourself, or maybe led to some unfair biases and perspectives about the opposite sex, maybe. Maybe that's not exactly allowed you to function well in relationships going forward. Maybe the hateful things that you say to yourself, like I'll never be good enough, I'm guaranteed to fail, I'm worthless. Side note, that is a hateful thing to say to yourself. You're like, hateful, Chris, that sounds really bad. I'm just doubting myself. No, hateful things to say to yourself. Maybe that voice that you have repurposed as your voice in your head actually sound a lot more like someone in your past. The ways we see ourselves are always at least informed by the things that have happened to us as well as through us. The things that have happened to us, not just through us, the things that we've done, but the things that have happened to us affect the way that we live in our lives and the way that we think about ourselves. Now, do you see why this is such an important distinction? You're able to work with thoughts differently When you're not in a space of, God knows I'm on my third strike of eternity today, so don't think about how pretty that lady is, or how I want to punch Ted from accounting, or how I'd like to start drinking at 10 a.m. because, well, Monday. You see how it's different when you're coming from a place of grace, of a God that sacrificed God's own self for you, of a God that wants the best life for you but doesn't expect you to get there on your own. God bless him, but where Patrick Morley loses me is when he starts to draw the line between temptation and sin, talks about the fuzzy line and the chart of what's visible and what isn't. Because here's the thing, you cannot outthink the thoughts in your mind. You can't, if your mind is the thing that has dominion over you, it's very stereotypically masculine of all of us to go, no, I will outthink you, brain. It's not going to happen. Because we are not our mind. We are always going to be dealing with some of those things. Trying to discern where your helpful thought is on the temptation-sin spectrum is not going to keep your hormone-ridden brain from thinking something that it shouldn't, whether it's lust, anger, or otherwise. You cannot conquer your secret thought life, especially not on your own. So one verse that gets used, and Morley actually used, is in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. So if you got Bibles, feel free to look that up. If you have internet rectangles, you can look it up on there. I will read it to us here now. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. And while you find that, 2 Corinthians is just a letter that was written to a group of people in the city of Corinth, and you can really find out about what these people are struggling with when you read the letter about the types of things that he's dealing with. And 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. It feels good, doesn't it? We're like, we capture the thoughts. Later in the verse, later in this chapter, he talks about like destroying temptation. He talks about conquering. He talks about all of these active verbs that feel really good when we're dealing with something as destructive as a bad thought life. But don't mistake the statement that we don't have to be afraid of our thoughts as a mandate. Don't be afraid. Don't mistake Paul saying, listen, we can take our thoughts captive for Christ. What he's not saying is, if you don't take every thought captive for Christ, then you have failed completely as a man, and that you have failed more than God can forgive, because it's not possible. Some of us might feel like we failed God if we don't do this perfectly, but within the context of this verse, Paul is telling a community of people who have really struggled with this in a lot of different ways, really struggled with outside voices taking over, really struggled with the cultural expectations that's been put on them their entire lives. Nothing we know about today. Paul is telling those people, he's telling them and is telling you that you don't have to count yourself out in this fight. You do not have to feel captive to your thoughts just because they inevitably will pop up again. And I feel like maybe that's where we lose a lot of guys, if I'm honest, at church. Where like the guys are struggling with something, they come in, they're like, all right, church, yeah, Perry's really good at singing, his coffee's super good, and Andy's this really nice guy, and every once in a while a weird guy from Milwaukee will come in, and the food's really good, and I meet the guys, and then I pray really hard. But I still, for some reason, struggle with some of the same things, so all of this must be a lie. All of this must just be hooey. All of this must be, I'm censoring myself. I learned how to swear from my grandma. I'm trying not to get in trouble. Don't write Mike any emails. But what I'm saying is, what I'm trying not to say, but they think it's all crap because it didn't completely destroy the destructive thoughts they had in their heads, because that was always going to happen. But what we need to reorient ourselves around today is not what we're running away from, but what we're running towards. It's not about avoiding or running away from sin. It's about what you're running towards. And Paul talks about this in the end a little. as does morally. But if we're trying to actively run towards God and God's vision for us, that will inevitably lead us to better things, both in our thought lives and in the actions that follow. We will undoubtedly make mistakes along the way, but Christ has set us free from the weight of that, in orienting our goals from trying to police our brain to living a life to where we're being more like Jesus. We're trying to run away from, hey, I had all of these thoughts that I have red flagged that I shouldn't have had, and therefore I must punish myself. Instead, how can we start each day going, you know what, today I'm going to be a little bit more like Jesus. Today I'm going to try to be I'm going to try to be a little bit better today. I'm going to see where God is leading me. Because it's not about what you're running away from. It's about where you're going towards. That can change everything. Sure, we might fail, and because we are all people with the past in here, we will, but we can still continue that walk towards Christ. We will undoubtedly make mistakes along the way, but Christ has set us free. Because if we're more like Jesus, it will help us live in a better place mentally and otherwise, because we will be led into what is most true about each and every one of us. And if we're able to walk in that truth, if we're able to step into what Christ says is true about you, then those other lies start to get a lot quieter. So before you walk out of here saying, okay, I'm a stupid boy with stupid boy thoughts because I'm stupid and I'm broken and it'll lead me to do stupid and broken things. Maybe this is the shame spiral that church has taught you to go through before. Maybe that's how you walked in this morning, but I hope that we can all take a deep breath corporately this morning and leave saying this. I live in a broken world full of broken people just like me. And we will all fail, but we worship a God that is always with us, that always forgives, that always loves us, and is always doing new things in us. And because of that, I can always stand in the grace that God gives me when my mind goes somewhere it doesn't want to go. And I can remember that I'm loved. I can remember that God calls me good. Genesis 1 comes before, or the first chapter of Genesis comes before the rest of it, FYI. God, before humans could do anything, saw at the center of them, you are very good. And God can reclaim that goodness in us even when we mess up. That's what Jesus is all about. I can remember that I'm loved, that God calls me good, and I can remember that everything is going to be okay. And maybe somebody needs to hear that today in regards to their thought life. Everything is going to be okay. How we think about our thoughts affects how we think about ourselves. How we think about our thoughts affects how we think about ourselves. Thinking of yourself as some trash that can't get it together is failing to live into who God made you to be. I just want to say that maybe as a challenge for us this morning. Thinking of yourself as less than the person that God made you to be is an insult to God indeed. As we pretend that everything is fine and letting it fester in an inner life that leads us to negative actions and consequences, that's failing to be who God made us to be. So may we continue to give ourselves grace, knowing that we have been made by an almighty God, and continue to run towards God in the form of Jesus as we prayerfully try to love people more like Jesus did. So again, if you've heard anything that I'm saying this morning, cut yourself a break. Not because I'm soft, not because I'm asking you to be gentle on sin or something. Well, I'm just trying to think of something that somebody would say to me. But give yourself the grace that God gives you. Think of yourself the way that God made you to be. Take on the grace that God is readily giving you in the form of Jesus. And don't focus on what you're running away from. Focus on what you're running toward, because the way that we think about ourselves has everything to do with whether or not you will be able to live into the truth of who God made you to be. It'll have everything to do with whether or not you do those things that God has made you to do. We're all in our own way. We've all lived in a lot of shame given to us by church and by everybody else because we can't quite get it together mentally. So regardless of what sin you're dealing with today, Jesus is freedom from that. We will mess it up, but Jesus is freedom. So practical application. In the moment where you find yourself in a place thinking or with a perspective that you feel like you shouldn't have, the thought should not be, dumb, stupid little boy, or whatever those voices are in your head. Instead, it should be recognizing it. Hey, I'm in a place that's not going to lead me down a good path. Man, I'm so grateful that God isn't mad at me. Man, I'm so grateful that Jesus made me to be more. Man, I'm so grateful. Now, where is God leading me next? If we start our lives trying to live into the blessings that we have, wow, couldn't that just change everything about our lives? It'll start to reprogram things. Neuroplasticity is the thing. Our brains get retrained for the way that things can be. So when things pop up, give yourself grace. And then follow where Jesus is leading you next. Sound good? I know this is like not how a lot of us are like, hey, Wednesday morning, let's do this. Andy also, before telling me what the time I was going to be here this morning, he also didn't tell me what the topic was before I said yes. But it's funny, on the thought life topic, oh, Andy's out of town, right? But I'm super grateful for you guys sticking with me this morning, and I think this is really important. So I am at your disposal, chris.kimpston@hopewaukee.org, if you'd like to talk more about this. But I'm super grateful to have you all here, and let me pray us out before we go into discussion groups. Lord Jesus, we thank you for the opportunity to come around to you, God. It is not easy, God, to take a hard look at the parts of ourselves we would rather never look at all. But God, we thank you for being a God that's with us in all of those places. God, we thank you for being the type of God that constantly calls us into more. We thank you for being the type of God that loves us well, that calls us to be more, gives us grace when we fail. And so God, I just pray that we would have the courage to pick up the grace that you give us today. Help us to do the hard thing. It feels better to punish ourselves when things go wrong, but God, your grace can transform lives. So God, I pray that you are unmistakably you, Jesus, in the lives of each and every one of the men in this room and the ones that aren't here, God. Fill them with hope. Set the path before their feet and give them strong feet to walk it. Give them eyes to see where you are, God, and the ears to hear the good things that you are calling them. And help us to love people the way that you're loved. It's in your good name, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. Cool. So, discussion questions. I was told I might be doing this differently than you guys usually do it, but nobody tell Andy and it'll be fine. All right, questions. Do you feel at the mercy of your own thoughts? Please hear me. I am not asking you to share your deepest, darkest sin. The getting started table's like, I'm out. I don't know what I signed up for. No, I'm not asking you to share your deepest, darkest sin with your table around you. What I am asking, do you feel at the mercy of your thoughts? This is acknowledging that we all struggle with this type of thing, right? But do you feel at the mercy of your own thoughts? Is this something that you've really felt under the thumb of recently? Number two, what is something affirming someone has said to you to reorient you to what's true? Who said that to you? Who makes you feel like the best version of yourself is a better way to ask that question. Who calls the true things out of you? Do you got somebody in your life? Is it a friend? Is it a parent? Is it a significant other? Is it a specific voice? And it could be an author. Maybe Morley and you are homeboys, and he's calling you into the best person that you can be. But who is that voice in your life? And maybe it's a wake-up call if the answer is no one. Number three, whose thought life might benefit if you remind them who they are? Here's the thing. We all have relationships in our lives in which we have special access, meaning your voice matters more to certain people because of the relationship you have with them. Think of your own life. If somebody that you loved and trusted affirmed goodness in you, called something out in you, told you that you were fearfully and wonderfully made, and identified the ways in which God has made you a man of God, how much would that transform your life? Maybe some of you are here because of that exact thing. That helps with thought life. So as we think about our own thought lives, I'm not asking you to police other people's thoughts, but instead, how can you lead out of it? Who do you have as a relationship in your life that might be able to lead somewhere? So those are some discussion questions. Do all of them, do some of them, do none of them. It'll be great. Thank you guys for welcoming me. I so appreciate it, for putting up with me. Maybe I'll see you at Waukee sometime soon. And grace and peace, friends. Go be good to each other, and have a great rest of your day.